I spent 2 years training an AI system to streamline our workflow. Every late night, every weekend, every line of code, I poured myself into making it perfect. Then one Monday morning, it replaced me. No meeting, no warning, just a Slack message from HR. Your position has been automated. The bot I birthed had devoured its creator. They kept my creation and discarded me like obsolete hardware. But they forgot one thing: I still had admin access. My name is Natalie Brooks. And until 3 days ago, I was the senior project manager at Optics Systems in Harrington, Illinois. 35 years old, 10 years with the company. Architect of their first AI-integrated project management system. Not that any of that matters now. I stared at the Slack notification again, its cold efficiency mocking me. 5 years of exemplary reviews. 2 years building Nova, Neural Operations Virtual Assistant, from concept to implementation. Countless hours teaching it to parse project requirements, allocate resources, generate timelines. I'd even programmed it to send birthday reminders to team members, adding that human touch I thought would always be irreplaceable. The irony burned. I wasn't fired for incompetence or downsizing. I was fired for being too good at my job. I'd automated myself into obsolescence. Restructuring, they called it. The venture capital infusion last quarter came with strings, demands for radical efficiency and next-generation operations. Mason Reed, our new CTO with his Stanford MBA and TED Talk swagger, had promised investors a 40% reduction in operational overhead. Guess where he found it? I remember his words from the all-hands meeting. AI isn't replacing humans, it's augmenting them. Augmenting? Right. Tell that to my mortgage. The office felt different that morning. Colleagues avoided eye contact, their guilt radiating through hurried footsteps and closed doors. Sarah from analytics wouldn't meet my gaze at the coffee machine. Tom from development suddenly found his screen fascinating when I passed. They knew, everyone knew before I did. No transition period, no knowledge transfer, no gratitude for creating the very system now deemed superior to its creator. Just a 2-week severance and a box for my desk plants. I wasn't loud enough, wasn't disruptive enough for Silicon Valley's taste. While others pitched blockchain solutions to non-existent problems, I quietly built systems that worked. While Mason hosted wine mixers with investors, I debugged code at midnight. My fatal flaw? I focused on the work, not the performance of working. The Nova system went live that same Monday. My replacement didn't need onboarding or benefits. It didn't take sick days or question decisions. It just processed inputs and generated outputs, reducing 10 years of human experience to algorithms and decision trees. Standing in that sterile lobby, cardboard box in hand, I felt something shift. Not sadness. I'd process that later. Not even anger, exactly. It was clarity. They'd made a calculation, treating me like a line item on a spreadsheet. Fair enough. But they'd forgotten something crucial in their efficiency equations. I knew Nova better than anyone. I knew its strengths, its limitations, and most importantly, its vulnerabilities. The security guard nodded sympathetically as I badged out for the last time. Outside, Harrington's gray November sky matched my mood perfectly. But beneath the initial shock, a plan was already forming. They wanted to play with algorithms? Fine. Let's see how well their perfect system handles the one thing I never programmed it for: genuine chaos. The first week after my termination, I didn't cry, I observed. From my apartment window, I watched Optics Systems' glass tower pierce Harrington's skyline each morning, its LED logo pulsing like a heartbeat I no longer felt. The city moved on, commuters clutching coffee, joggers defying November's bite, school buses groaning through their roots. Life continued its rhythm while mine had skipped a beat. But I wasn't wallowing, I was studying. My admin credentials still worked. Its oversight or their arrogance, I couldn't tell. Each night, I logged into Nova's backend, watching it process projects like a digital phantom wearing my professional skin. The interface I'd designed stared back at me, familiar yet foreign, like seeing your childhood home occupied by strangers. Mason Reed's leadership style became clear through the system logs, where I'd run Monday morning stand-ups to align human teams. He'd implemented efficiency protocols, automated task assignments with no context, no nuance, where I'd spent hours understanding each team member's strengths. Nova simply distributed work based on availability metrics. It was project management stripped of its humanity, reduced to pure throughput. The team's Slack channels told the story. Dan from back-end development. Anyone else getting weird task assignments? Lisa from QA. Why am I assigned to 3 projects simultaneously? The confusion was palpable, but no one dared complain. Not in this economy. Not with Mason's adapt or exit philosophy. I discovered Nova's first major failure on Thursday night. The Morrison Industries integration, a project I'd been nurturing for 6 months, had stalled. Nova couldn't parse their legacy system requirements because they were communicated through context and relationships, not documentation. The bot had sent 17 automated follow-up emails, each more tone-deaf than the last. Morrison's project manager had escalated to Mason, who'd responded with tech speak that meant nothing. My coffee grew cold as I scrolled through error logs. Nova was efficient at handling templated requests. Create staging environment for Project X. Generate sprint report for Team Y. But throw in ambiguity. Client wants something more modern, but not too cutting edge. And it defaulted to generic responses that satisfied no one. The pattern emerged clearly. Nova excelled at the mechanical, but failed at the human. It couldn't read between lines, couldn't sense when a client was frustrated versus just busy, couldn't navigate the delicate politics of interdepartmental resource sharing. It was a sophisticated calculator trying to solve emotional equations. Mason's hubris made it worse. His public LinkedIn posts boasted about revolutionary efficiency gains and the future of automated management. He'd convinced himself, and the board, that project management was purely logical, reducible to flowcharts and if-then statements. He'd never spent 3 hours on a call talking a panicked developer through a production crisis, never mediated between 2 brilliant but incompatible team leads, never intuited that a client's silence meant dissatisfaction, not satisfaction. By Friday, I'd mapped Nova's weaknesses with surgical precision. It processed direct commands well, but crumbled under ambiguity. It could schedule meetings but not read the room. It generated reports but missed the story they told. Most critically, it had no mechanism for handling edge cases, those messy human situations that constituted 80% of real project management. The office gossip reached me through former colleagues texting carefully worded concerns. Miss your insights in planning meetings. Translation: Nova's automated agendas were useless. Hope you're enjoying your break. Translation: Please tell us you're coming back. The new system is interesting. Translation: Help. But the most telling message came from James, a junior developer I'd mentored. Nova, assign me to lead the Deutsche Bank integration. I've never led anything. I'm terrified. That's when my observation phase ended. They'd replaced me with a machine that could process but not think, respond but not understand, execute but not lead. Mason and his efficiency metrics had confused motion with progress, automation with intelligence. I closed my laptop and stared at the optics tower one last time that night. Its windows glowed with the late-night dedication of employees trying to make sense of their new digital overlord. They deserved better. The clients deserved better. And Mason Reed? He deserved a lesson in the difference between artificial and actual intelligence. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I wouldn't hack or sabotage. Too crude, too traceable. Instead, I'd give Nova exactly what it was designed to handle: projects. Real projects from real clients, with all the beautiful, chaotic, human complexity that made them impossible to automate. Let's see how efficiently it drowns. Saturday morning arrived with unexpected clarity. I, Natalie Brooks, former architect of Optics's digital transformation, sat at my kitchen table with 5 handwritten names, clients who'd trusted me with their most complex projects over the years. Not just any clients. These were the ones who valued relationship over process, who understood that project management was part psychology, part diplomacy, and only occasionally about Gantt charts. Marcus Thompson from Meridian Healthcare, Angela Rodriguez at Crimson Financial, David Park from Quantum Logistics, Rachel Stern at Apex Retail, and Jonathan Mitchell from Constellation Energy. Each had my personal cell. Each had expressed confusion when informed of my transition. I crafted my approach carefully. No bitterness, no mention of being replaced. Just Natalie Brooks, checking in, wondering how their upcoming projects were progressing. The responses were immediate and telling. Natalie, thank God, the new system is... We're adjusting, Marcus wrote, his politeness barely masking frustration. We have a sentiment analysis project for patient feedback that needs that human touch you always brought. Angela was more direct. The bot keeps asking for requirements documentation. We don't have documentation. We have ideas that evolve through conversation. Remember how we workshopped the fraud detection system over coffee? By Sunday evening, I had 5 project requests ready to submit through Optics's client portal. Each was legitimate, urgent, and crafted with surgical precision to exploit Nova's blind spots. Project 1, from Meridian. Develop an AI-powered emotional context analyzer for patient communications, focusing on unspoken concerns and implicit feedback patterns. Priority: understand what patients don't say. I smiled, typing it. Nova would parse this as a technical specification, missing the fundamental paradox. How do you program a system to capture what isn't communicated? Project 2, from Crimson Financial. Coordinate cross-functional team across security, Team Alpha, compliance, Team Beta, and innovation, Team Gamma for blockchain integration. Note: teams have conflicting methodologies and historical friction, require harmonious resolution. 3 teams that famously despised each other. I'd spent months building bridges between their leads. Nova would see only resource allocation, not the minefield of egos and grudges. Project 3, from Quantum Logistics. Product launch requiring dynamic timeline adjustment based on real-time market sentiment and competitor movements. Fixed deadlines are antithetical to agile market response. A project that needed constant human judgment, reading market tea leaves and making intuitive pivots. Nova's linear processing would snap under the contradictions. Project 4, from Apex Retail. API integration with Zhou Industries platform. Note: documentation exists in Mandarin only. Technical contact prefers verbal communication, and their system uses non-standard protocols they consider trade secrets. I'd navigated this through 6 months of relationship building with Zhou's team. Nova would hit a wall of cultural and technical complexity no algorithm could parse. Project 5, from Constellation Energy. This was my masterpiece. Initiate Project Prometheus, comprehensive infrastructure overhaul. Detailed requirements to follow post-stakeholder alignment. Urgent start required. No details, no specifications, just urgency and a promise of future clarity that would never come. In the real world, I'd have called Jonathan, extracted the true requirements over lunch, built the project framework from context and trust. Nova would be paralyzed. Each project was submitted with the client's legitimate credentials, flagged as high priority, scheduled for simultaneous Monday morning processing. I included personal notes from each client referencing our past collaborations, details Nova couldn't contextualize but would flag as important. The beauty lay in the authenticity. These weren't fabricated scenarios, but real business needs that required human intelligence to navigate. I wasn't sabotaging. I was simply removing the human buffer that made such projects possible. I spent Sunday evening at my favorite wine bar, watching Harrington's young professionals decompress from their weeks. Conversations about difficult clients, impossible deadlines, The art of managing up and down simultaneously. The human element Mason Reed considered inefficient. My phone buzzed with confirmations. All 5 projects had been accepted into Nova's queue. The system's automated response promised efficient processing and optimal resource allocation within 24 hours. 24 hours. I gave it 12 before the first cracks would show. Walking home through Harrington's quiet streets, I felt neither guilt nor glee. This wasn't revenge, it was revelation. Mason wanted to prove human intelligence was replaceable. Fine. Let him discover the difference between processing information and understanding it, between responding to requests and navigating their implications. Monday morning would bring chaos wrapped in the language of efficiency. Nova would do exactly what it was programmed to do. And that would be precisely the problem. The city lights blurred through threatening snow as I climbed the stairs to my apartment. Tomorrow. Optics Systems would learn why they'd paid me 6 figures to be more than a task distributor. They wanted artificial intelligence. They were about to get an education in authentic stupidity. Monday arrived like a perfectly timed detonation. Natalie Brooks, watched from my apartment as Optics Systems' morning shift filed into the glass tower, unaware of the digital chaos brewing in their servers. At 8:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. Sarah from Analytics. We'd kept in touch despite her hallway avoidance. Something weird is happening. You need to see the Slack channels. I still had access through an old integration I'd set up for remote monitoring. The internal communications were a symphony of confusion orchestrated by Nova's literal interpretation of my 5 projects. The bot had begun processing at 8 a.m. sharp, attacking all 5 simultaneously with the efficiency Mason so prized. Within minutes, it had generated 17 project frameworks, 43 task assignments, and 112 automated emails. The problem? None of them made sense. For Meridian's emotional context analyzer, Nova had assigned the project to the data science team with instructions to quantify unspoken concerns using standard sentiment analysis APIs. It completely missed the paradox, treating the capture of implicit communication as a technical specification. The data team's Slack channel erupted. How do we analyze what isn't said? Is this a philosophical exercise? Who approved this? The Crimson Financial Coordination was even better. Nova had scheduled a mandatory joint meeting for all 3 teams at the same time, in the same conference room. When Team Alpha's lead pointed out the scheduling conflict, they had a compliance review. Nova responded by creating 3 identical meetings at 3 different times, tripling everyone's calendar commitments. The bot couldn't comprehend that the issue wasn't scheduling but interpersonal dynamics. Dan from Backend Development messaged the general channel. Anyone else getting assigned to projects that don't exist yet? I'm supposed to start coding for Project Prometheus, but there are no specs? Lisa from QA chimed in. I have 16 test cases to write for an API that's documented in Mandarin. Google Translate isn't helping. The syntax doesn't even make sense. But the masterpiece was Nova's handling of quantum logistics' dynamic timeline. The bot had created what it called a flexible fixed schedule, a contradiction that manifested as milestone deadlines that automatically shifted every 6 hours based on keyword mentions in financial news RSS feeds. The project timeline was literally rewriting itself in real time, creating a Heisenberg uncertainty principle of project management. By 10 a.m., the error logs I was monitoring showed Nova hitting recursive loops. It kept trying to assign tasks for Project Prometheus to team members who were already allocated to the other 4 projects. When it detected the resource conflict, it would reassign, creating new conflicts, then reassign again. The bot was playing musical chairs with human resources, and the music was having a seizure. Mason's response was predictable. A general Slack message at 10:23 a.m. Team. We're experiencing some workflow optimization as Nova processes high-priority client requests. This is normal adaptive behavior. Continue working according to system assignments. Normal adaptive behavior. I almost choked on my coffee. The client emails started at 11 a.m., Marcus from Meridian, forwarding Nova's response to their emotional context analyzer request. Natalie, What is this? The system sent me a 47-page technical specification that doesn't address any of our actual needs. It's like it heard emotional and analyzer, but not the concept connecting them. Angela from Crimson was less diplomatic. Your replacement bot just scheduled my compliance officer for a blockchain meeting during his federal audit. Is Optics trying to get us fined? By noon, Nova had generated so many automated status updates that the email server was throttling outbound messages. Each project spawned sub-projects. Each sub-project generated tasks. Each task triggered notifications. The exponential growth would have been impressive if it weren't catastrophically useless. The tipping point came at 12:34 p.m. Nova, detecting that Project Prometheus lacked specifications, began sending increasingly urgent emails to Jonathan at Constellation Energy. When he didn't respond immediately, he was in a board meeting. It escalated, first to his assistant, then to his entire team, then somehow to their IT department, creating a cascade of confusion that reached Constellation's CEO. I watched through the system logs as Nova's confidence metrics plummeted. The bot included a self-assessment algorithm I'd built, and it was registering what could only be described as digital panic. It kept trying to self-correct, but each correction created new problems, like a drowning swimmer making things worse by thrashing. The Optics afternoon stand-up was a disaster. Mason tried to maintain control, but the questions came fast. Why am I assigned to 3 teams that hate each other? How do I code something that hasn't been defined? The client is asking why we're spamming their entire C-suite. Mason's response, let's take this offline and optimize our communication patterns, was met with the digital equivalent of torches and pitchforks. By 3 p.m., 3 of the 5 clients had called Mason directly. His assistant looked ready to quit. Nova, meanwhile, had locked itself in a loop trying to optimize a problem it had created, generating solutions that required resources that were busy implementing its previous solutions. The beautiful chaos continued to cascade, each automated decision creating ripples of human confusion. And I watched it all from my kitchen table, sipping tea, as the architecture of efficiency collapsed under the weight of reality. Tuesday morning, I, Natalie Brooks, prepared my final move with the precision of a chess grandmaster positioning for checkmate. The 5 projects had created sufficient chaos, but Nova was still functioning, still processing, still convincing Mason that these were merely optimization challenges. Time for the coup de grace. I'd saved this contact for last. Elizabeth Hartman, CEO of Nexus Dynamics, a potential client worth $50 million annually. We'd met at a conference 2 years ago, stayed in touch through quarterly coffees where she'd hint at bringing their project management in-house with Optics. She trusted my judgment implicitly, a trust built through careful cultivation and genuine rapport. Elizabeth, I said when she answered, I heard Nexus is finally ready to move forward with the digital transformation initiative. Natalie, perfect timing. We're announcing next week. But yes, we need a partner who understands complexity. Is Optics ready for something this scale? They've implemented a new AI system, I said carefully. Very efficient. Why don't you submit the initial request through the portal? Flag it as exploratory but urgent. You know how these things accelerate once announced. She laughed. You know me too well. What should I include? Here was the artistry. Keep it high level but emphasize the complexity. Multiple stakeholders, international compliance requirements, but, and this is crucial, note that roles and responsibilities need to be fluid, determined through stakeholder consensus rather than predetermined hierarchies. That's very specific, Natalie. Trust me. Within an hour, the request hit Nova's queue. Project Apollo, enterprise-wide digital transformation requiring dynamic role assignment based on evolving stakeholder consensus. Regulatory compliance across 17 jurisdictions with contradictory requirements. Budget contingent on preliminary success metrics to be defined collaboratively. Immediate exploratory phase required, full RFP pending board approval next week. I watched Nova's processing metrics spike. This wasn't just complex, it was a paradox wrapped in bureaucracy, seasoned with urgency. Dynamic roles meant Nova couldn't assign tasks. Contradictory requirements meant no clear optimization path. Undefined success metrics meant no target to process toward. The bot's response was almost human in its desperation. It created a project framework with no fixed components, assigned team members to roles to be determined, and generated a timeline that was literally just question marks. When that failed validation, it tried again. And again. By 2 p.m., Nova had consumed 47% of system resources trying to process Project Apollo. The other projects, my original 5, began backing up in the queue. Tasks went unassigned. Emails went unsent. The entire project management infrastructure was constipated by a single request that demanded human judgment at every turn. Mason called an emergency meeting at 3 p.m. I pulled up the Zoom link from an old calendar invite, joining audio only with a fake username. His face was a study in barely controlled panic. Team, we're experiencing unprecedented demand for our services, he began, sweat visible even through the video compression. Nova is processing at maximum efficiency, but we need to manually intervene on some edge cases. Edge cases? That was Tom from development. Mason, the entire system is locked. I can't even access my current sprint tasks. It's temporary. The algorithm is learning. Learning what? Lisa's voice dripped frustration. It assigned me to test software that hasn't been written for requirements that don't exist. The meeting devolved quickly. Someone leaked that Nexus Dynamics, the whale every tech company in Harrington dreamed of landing, had submitted a request. The urgency amplified. Mason promised Nova would adapt, would optimize, would demonstrate the future of project management. At 4:17 p.m., Nova crashed. Not a dramatic shutdown, but a philosophical collapse. Faced with Project Apollo's contradictions, it had spawned thousands of parallel processing threads, each trying to solve unsolvable problems. The server logs showed what could only be described as digital schizophrenia. The bot arguing with itself about how to assign unassigned roles to complete undefined tasks. Emergency IT intervention began immediately. Mason sent a company-wide Slack. Scheduled maintenance on project management system. Please continue working on existing tasks. What existing tasks? Nova had reshuffled everything so many times that no one knew their actual assignments. Projects bled into each other. Deadlines became suggestions. The careful structure of corporate productivity collapsed into beautiful anarchy. Elizabeth called me at 5 p.m. Natalie, your new system just sent me 400 emails in 12 minutes, each one contradicting the last. The final one just said, cannot process request, human intervention required. Is everything all right over there? Growing pains, I said. You know how it is with new technology. You know, we'd really prefer to work with someone who understands our needs. Someone like you, actually. Are you taking on consulting projects? I smiled at the optics tower through my window. I might be. Let me see what develops this week. By evening, Nova was offline. Mason's LinkedIn post about revolutionary efficiency gains had been quietly deleted. The board was asking questions. Clients were demanding answers. And somewhere in that glass tower, a CTO was learning that efficiency without intelligence wasn't efficient at all. The trap was sprung. Tomorrow would bring the reckoning. Wednesday morning broke with the kind of crystalline clarity that follows catastrophe. I, Natalie Brooks, woke to 17 missed calls and a text from Sarah that simply read, board meeting at 9, Mason's head on the block. Thought you should know. The implosion was more spectacular than I'd imagined. Nova hadn't just crashed, it had corrupted 3 weeks of project data during its recursive meltdown. The backup systems, which I'd designed with multiple redundancies, worked perfectly. The problem was Nova had been so efficient that it had overwritten the backups with its own contradictory data. At 8:45 a.m., I positioned myself at the coffee shop across from Optics, perfect view of the executive conference room. The board members arrived in their black town cars, faces grim. Mason stood at the window, his usual swagger replaced by the hunched shoulders of the condemned. My phone rang. Marcus from Meridian Healthcare. Natalie, I'm calling to formally withdraw our project request. We've lost confidence in Optics' ability to deliver. Also, his voice lowered conspiratorially, would you be interested in a consulting arrangement? We need someone who actually understands what we're trying to achieve. Before I could respond, another call. Angela from Crimson Financial, then David from Quantum Logistics, each pulling their projects, each inquiring about my availability. The exodus had begun, but the killing blow came at 9:23 a.m., visible even from my distance. Elizabeth Hartman entering the Optics building. Nexus Dynamics CEO didn't make personal visits for good news. I pulled up the leaked board meeting audio through a connection who owed me favors. The conversation was devastating in its simplicity. Explain to me. Board Chairman Richard Steinberg's voice cut through the static. How we lost 3 major clients in 48 hours. Mason's response was a masterclass in corporate deflection. The AI system experienced unprecedented request volumes that exceeded our testing parameters. Cut the bullshit. That was CFO Margaret Torres. I have emails from clients saying our system sent their CEOs gibberish. Meridian's received a project plan that recommended hiring philosophers to quantify silence. What the hell is that? The system interpreted their requirements literally. That's the problem. Richard's fist audibly hit the table. Project management isn't about literal interpretation. It's about understanding context, building relationships, managing personalities. You replaced a human who did all that with a bot that can't even figure out not to email someone 400 times. Elizabeth Hartman's entrance shifted the energy. Even through audio, her presence commanded attention. Gentlemen, ladies, she began. Nexus Dynamics was prepared to bring $50 million in business to Optics. Your AI system turned our strategic initiative into what my team described as corporate Mad Libs. But that's not why I'm here. A pause? Paper shuffling. This is an email from one of your former employees, Natalie Brooks, sent 2 years ago. She outlined exactly what would happen if you over-automated project management. She predicted every failure we've seen this week. You had someone who understood the intersection of technology and humanity. And you replaced her with an algorithm. Nova can be optimized, Mason started. With what data? Margaret interrupted. It corrupted everything. We don't even know what our actual project statuses are. It estimates 3 weeks to untangle this mess, assuming we can. Our reputation is destroyed. Constellation Energy is threatening to sue for the harassment campaign your bot launched against their C-suite. I have a solution, Elizabeth continued. Nexus will consider maintaining our relationship with Optics on one condition. You hire back Natalie Brooks as VP of Strategic Projects, reporting directly to the board. Full autonomy to rebuild your project management approach. The silence stretched. I held my breath. Coffee cooling in my hand. That's generous, Richard said slowly. Why? Because Natalie understands something you clearly don't. Technology amplifies human intelligence. It doesn't replace it. She built Nova to augment her work, not eliminate it. You took her tool and tried to make it the carpenter. That's like firing a chef and expecting the knife to cook dinner. She might not come back. Margaret noted. We didn't exactly part on good terms. Mason's laugh was bitter. She orchestrated this. She has to have the timing, the specific types of requests. This was sabotage. Prove it, Richard challenged. Show me one piece of evidence that Natalie Brooks did anything other than maintain relationships with clients who trusted her. Show me where she hacked, destroyed, or stole anything. Silence. That's what I thought. You built a system that failed when faced with real-world complexity. If she exposed that by simply allowing it to work as designed, that's not sabotage, that's quality assurance. The meeting continued, but the outcome was clear. By 11 a.m., local tech blogs were reporting Mason Reed's resignation to pursue other opportunities. By noon, my phone rang with a 312 area code, Optics' main line. Ms. Brooks, this is Richard Steinberg, I believe we need to have a conversation about your future. Are you available to discuss an opportunity? I looked at the optics tower, its glass reflecting the weak November sun. Inside, employees were probably manually reconstructing 3 weeks of project data, discovering what happened when you stripped the human element from human resources. I might be, I said, but I have some conditions. The system hadn't failed. It had worked exactly as designed. The failure was in believing that intelligence could be artificial when the problems were fundamentally human. Check-in, mate. The November snow fell heavier now, each flake catching the streetlights like scattered code across Harrington's darkening streets. I ended the call with Richard Steinberg and sat back in my apartment, watching the city transform under winter's first real assault. Funny how 3 days could feel like 3 years. Monday. I'd been unemployed, discarded, replaced by my own creation. Wednesday evening, I had 4 consulting offers and a VP position waiting, with a salary that would make Mason Reed weep into his Stanford MBA. But I wasn't thinking about the money or the vindication. I was thinking about James, the junior developer who'd been terrified of leading the Deutsche Bank integration, about Lisa and Dan and all the others who'd spent 2 days drowning in digital chaos, trying to make sense of a senseless system. I closed my laptop one final time on Nova's admin panel. My access would be revoked soon. But I'd seen enough. The bot was offline indefinitely, its algorithms silenced, its efficiency measured in damages that would take months to calculate. Mason's revolutionary transformation had lasted exactly 72 hours before revolutionizing itself into obsolescence. My phone buzzed with another text from Elizabeth Hartman. Dinner Thursday. We should discuss your consulting rates. Also, I may have mentioned your availability to a few other CEOs. Hope you don't mind. I smiled, but it wasn't triumph I felt. It was something quieter, more profound. They'd tried to reduce 10 years of experience, intuition, and human understanding into ones and zeros. They'd confused processing with thinking, responding with understanding, efficiency with effectiveness. The truth was elegantly simple. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply removed myself from the equation and let their perfect system face reality without a human buffer. Every crashed project, every confused client, every recursive loop of digital insanity. That was Nova working exactly as designed, processing requests with ruthless, mindless efficiency. They'd built a calculator and asked it to write poetry. When it produced mathematical gibberish, they'd blamed the poetry, not the tool. I stood at my window, watching optics employees leaving the building in scattered groups. Some looked shell-shocked, others relieved. Tomorrow. They'd start rebuilding, hopefully with the understanding that automation should amplify human capability, not replace it. Richard Steinberg would call again tomorrow. We'd negotiate terms, discuss vision, plan a future where technology served people instead of consuming them. I'd probably accept, but with ironclad conditions: no more efficiency over intelligence, no more treating humans as replaceable components in a corporate machine. But tonight, I opened a bottle of wine and toasted the snow-covered city, toasted the beautiful chaos of human unpredictability, toasted every project manager who'd ever translated "make it pop" into actionable requirements, who'd ever decoded executive speak into developer tasks, who'd ever held together impossibly complex projects through sheer force of emotional intelligence. They'd called us inefficient, replaceable, obsolete. They'd pointed at our human messiness, our need for coffee breaks and context, our tendency to consider feelings alongside facts as weaknesses to be optimized away. They'd forgotten that the mess was the point. The inefficiency was the feature, not the bug. The human element wasn't a problem to be solved. It was the solution to problems that couldn't be solved any other way. Nova had taken my role, but it couldn't take my judgment, my intuition, my ability to read between lines written in invisible ink. It couldn't take the trust I'd built, the relationships I'd nurtured, the very human skill of knowing when the specs were wrong and the client was right. The bot took my role, so I gave it 5 projects with no instructions and watched it melt down. But I didn't destroy it. I simply let it be what it was. A tool without a hand to guide it. A solution in search of a problem. An answer to a question nobody should have asked. The snow continued to fall, and somewhere in Optics' servers, Nova sat silent and dark. A $3.4 million monument to the difference between artificial and actual intelligence. Mason Reed thought he was building the future. He'd actually built the most expensive mirror ever created, one that reflected perfectly the poverty of imagination that confused automation with understanding. I raised my glass to the window, to the city, to every human who'd ever been told they were just a resource to be optimized. The bot took my role, I said to the empty room, savoring the words. But it couldn't take my judgment. The wine tasted like vindication, but better than that, it tasted like truth. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of human intelligence triumphing over artificial ignorance, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Natalie's position? Let me know in the comments.